In 2014, the rains failed in Brazil. Not in your country, not in the news where you live. In the highlands of Minas Gerais, a place most people couldn't find on a map. 6 months later, your morning coffee got more expensive. 2 years later, a government collapsed in Kenya. These three things: a drought you didn't see, a price increase you barely noticed, and a political crisis on a different continent were the same event. Today, I'm going to show you how to see that. This is the second video in a course about thinking about tomorrow. And if you only learn one thing from this whole course, I'd want it to be this one. Most people see the world as a list of separate problems. Inflation over here, climate over there, politics in another box, their own life in yet another. That's not how the world works. The world works in connections. And once you can see the connections, you stop being surprised by what happens next. Not because you can predict it, we covered that last time, but because nothing arrives without a trail you could have followed. Let me show you the trail. Brazil grows about a third of the world's coffee, the kind in your morning cup, almost certainly. In 2014, the worst drought in 80 years hit the coffee-growing regions. Plants died. The next year's harvest was small. The year after that was smaller. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The world doesn't just stop drinking coffee when Brazil has a bad year. Demand stays the same. Supply drops, so the price goes up. By 2016, coffee was 50% more expensive on global markets than it had been in 2013. That's link one. Drought in Brazil leads to expensive coffee everywhere. Pause for a second and notice what just happened. A weather event in one country changed a price in your country. You didn't do anything. The drought didn't reach you, but the consequence did. This is what people mean when they say everything is connected. They don't mean it in a mystical sense. They mean it in a literally there are pipes and ships and contracts running between these things sense. Here's where it gets stranger. Kenya is the world's second largest coffee exporter from Africa. When global coffee prices spike, Kenya makes more money per bag of beans. That sounds like good news. But the story doesn't end there. When farmers see the price jump, they grow more coffee. They convert other land they used to use for food crops, into coffee plantations. Across Kenya in 2015 and 2016, food acreage shrunk, while coffee acreage grew. The next year, Kenya had to import more food. Imported food costs foreign currency. Kenya didn't have enough foreign currency. The shilling weakened. Imported food got even more expensive. By 2017, food prices in Kenya had risen sharply. People were angry. The government, which had promised to keep food affordable, was blamed. The 2017 Kenyan election was the most contested in the country's modern history. The Supreme Court annulled the result. The government did not survive in its previous form. Drought in Brazil leads to expensive coffee. Everywhere leads to land conversion. In Kenya, leads to food crisis. In Kenya, leads to political collapse. In Kenya. That's the trail. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The story I just told is roughly true, but I simplified it. Real causation has dozens of strands. There were other reasons Kenyan food prices rose. There were other reasons that election was contested. But every one of those strands works the same way. Each one is a connection most people don't see. Each one moves quietly through pipes and ships and contracts and weather patterns. And each one ends up changing someone's life thousands of miles from where it started. The world is not a list of separate problems. The world is a web. Pause here. Take a breath. Think about something in your life that got more expensive last year, or harder to find, or weirder politically. There's a trail behind it. There's always a trail. So, how do you actually use this? 3 things. The first is what I just showed you. Trace the trail backward. When something changes in your life, a price, a policy, a job market, ask, where did this come from? Who decided what and why? What happened before that? Most people stop at the first answer they hear. The skill is to keep going. 2 steps back, 3 steps back, 4. The real cause is rarely the first cause you find. The second is harder. Notice the loops. Some changes feed on themselves. When food prices rise, people protest. Governments respond, sometimes by printing money to subsidize food, which makes the currency weaker, which makes imported food more expensive, which raises food prices. That's a loop. It doesn't stop at the first lap. It goes around again. Every time a journalist or politician says something is spiraling, what they mean, even if they don't realize it, is they're watching a feedback loop. The third is the hardest. Anticipate the second order. When something big happens, ask, and then what? Not, what's the immediate consequence? What's the consequence of that consequence? Cheap solar panels mean less coal demand. And then what? Coal towns lose jobs. And then what? Politics in those regions shift. And then what? National elections change. And then what? Energy policy changes. The third or fourth and then what is usually where the surprise lives. There's a name for this. It's called systems thinking. I held off on saying that because I wanted you to see it before you labeled it. Most people never learn this skill, even though it sounds simple, because the moment they hear systems thinking, they think it's something academic, something for engineers or consultants, and they tune out. It is not academic. It is the most practical thing in this entire course. Everything that happens in your life, your job, your money, your relationships, your country, sits inside systems. The systems have parts. The parts are connected. The connections have loops. The loops produce consequences nobody intended. You will not understand any of it by looking at the parts in isolation. You can only understand it by looking at the connections. This is the spine of every other video in this course, every single one. When we talk about climate, demographics, technology, AI, we will be talking about systems. When we run scenarios, when we imagine futures, when we make decisions, systems. If you only watch one video twice, watch this one. Today's assignment. Pick something in the news this week. Anything. A story you scrolled past, a headline that annoyed you, a statistic that got quoted. Then ask 3 questions, just 3. Where did this come from? Trace 1 step back. Is there a loop here? Could this thing make itself worse or better? What happens next? Not the immediate next, the one after that. You don't need to be right. You'll probably be wrong on the details. That's not the point. The point is the muscle of seeing the trail. Most people never use it. Once you start, you don't stop. In the next video, we're going to do something that sounds completely different, but is actually the same skill. We're going to talk about how different cultures see time itself. Linear, cyclical, generational. Because here's the thing. Once you understand that the world is a system of connections, the next question is, Connections through what? And the answer most Western minds default to is through time in a straight line. That assumption is one of the things holding most people's foresight back. I'll see you there. 3 takeaways. 1. Nothing happens in isolation. There is always a trail. 2. Some changes loop back on themselves. Watch for the spirals. 3. The third, and then what, is usually where the surprise lives. Next, who's tomorrow? Different cultures, different futures.